Greetings. Good frosty Monday morning here in southeastern Coastal Carolina. It is March 28th, 2022. Two of my friends from high school are celebrating their 46th birthday, so Tony and John, happy birthday. This is a response video where I am responding to comments made on my last video. Specifically, I guess you could say I'm isolating Staci, based on just a couple of comments you said in your long response. Normally what I like to do is read the comments out loud, but between you and Miss Sheila, I just can't do that. I just can't. And believe it or not, this is actually take two. I'm not sure if this will even make it to the internet because the first one went over 30 minutes and I feel like I spiraled a little bit there. So, Staci, you'd made some comments about how you identify yourself, and you made some comments about your home state and some of the laws being passed, and you made some comments about your personal emotional health, and then you made you made some comments and I didn't really know how to take them, as far as like there's people you just can't stand, you just can't open yourself up to, and you said Trumpers and flat earthers, and then you said something about you don't hate Republicans, but Trump didn't accurately represent the Republican Party. So again, because it's written word, it's not all, you don't get the facial expressions or the body language, and you don't get to pick up on subtleties and nuance, but I'll respond anyways. And I want to be forthright. Yes, to some of the things you said, you're absolutely right. Between the both of you, it is my channel. It's not big enough, so it doesn't get monetized. I'm not making any money off of it. I use this as catharsis, as therapy and whatnot. And because a lot of information was exchanged in the comments that both you and Sheila provided, which, by the way, ladies, I'm terribly grateful that you chose to get involved and have these conversations. But with that being said, if certain things are said that stimulate conversation, I think we have to take advantage of that opportunity. And this all goes back to a video I made last week where I wanted to focus specifically on outrage culture and cancel culture, where, if you look at talk television from the late 80s, early 90s, where these production companies took these micro issues all over the United States, brought them to a studio, focused heavily on them, made them feel like it was a macro issue, which thus gave birth to the helicopter parent. The little angels and the soccer moms and the participation trophies and all of this stuff, because these micro issues were made to feel as though they were macro issues thanks to talk television. Talk television still exists, but not in the same form. Now it's been replaced by the podcast or other forms of media. And I was attempting to highlight how the media, whether it's legacy, social, or some other form, will take a micro issue, blow it up like it's a macro issue, shove it down your throat, basically forcing you to have an opinion and take a side. And all I was attempting to say in the video was, why? If it's not in your backyard, if it doesn't directly affect you, if you're not invested in the content or the subject, why do you even have to have an opinion and take a side? I mean, you can have an opinion, but why do you have to invest yourself in one direction or the other? You know what I'm saying? So I saw the comments, and long story short, I had to make a follow-up video where I basically said, I think the point got lost. Did I make some apologies? Yes. Basically, I made an apology because as the owner of the channel, as the content creator, I have to take responsibility for whatever direction the conversation goes. And I was apologizing for either A, choosing a topic that was hypersensitive to use as an example, and basically taking responsibility for the fact that maybe I didn't do enough to emphasize my point, but instead I used an example that basically became so loud that at least Sheila and Staci were deaf to what else I was trying to say. Because the moment I hit that nerve, boom. So then I got responses to that video, the point being lost. And specifically, I was going to focus for a moment on Miss Staci. And I'll try to keep it simple, and I'll try to keep it to 20 minutes or less. I'm probably somebody you'd call a pro-Trumper. I'm not a card-carrying Republican, and if you look at my back catalog of videos, I've got plenty of videos explaining that. I'm not a card-carrying Republican for various reasons. After my time in the military, where you had to drink the Kool-Aid, delicious, where you had to be all in, I did it. I'm done with it. To some degree, I'm still doing it in my current job, and those are things you have to accept. But in areas I can control, yeah, I'm not a card-carrying Republican for various reasons. When it comes to politics, I despise the Democratic Party on history and legacy alone. I've made a handful of videos discussing that. The simplest way I can put it, and I think I stole it from somebody, but I don't know who, I look at the parties like dogs. Democrats are a big breed of dog, Republicans are a small breed of dog. No matter what, they're both going to shit in your yard. Which mess do you want to clean up? Now, Staci, you and I don't have to agree on that. We can think differently. We can express our opinions differently. But hopefully we'll keep the dialogue going and we'll keep the discourse going. You were talking about the anti-trans laws in your state and some of the concerns and the anxieties you're having over that. And I can't remember if you were trying to make the point that you can't stand Trumpers. Well, I'm somebody that would be labeled as a Trumper. And I'll tell you why. No, he was not your atypical, prototypical Republican, but he understood that in today's era, we're stuck with a two-party system. We haven't had any sort of cataclysmic event that allows for a third or fourth party to really make a wave, and I guess maybe that's because of the special interest groups. So he ran as a Republican. Was he the best on Twitter? No. Was he the most eloquent speaker in personal interviews? No. I think Kid Rock said it best. I'd much rather have somebody speak from the heart, speak off the cuff, and get it wrong a couple times versus not say what's in their heart, not say what's on their mind, and let somebody else speak for them, well-rehearsed, well-polished speeches. We've had decades and decades and years of the polished political person. I liked Trump for being the opposite of that. I also liked the results. Now, we can disagree on the results, but I looked at Trump as like the tradesman. All right? I need an electrician to fix electricity. I need a plumber to fix plumbing. I need a construction worker to do construction. All right? Whether or not we get into a philosophical debate and philosophize, wax ecstatic, with tremendous articulation and vocabulary, cool. But that's not why I hired you. I hired you to do this. Fix my plumbing, fix my electricity, fix my house, whatever the case may be. And that's why I like Trump. Now, moving on from that. Staci, hopefully you continue to stay with the channel. Hopefully you continue to stay involved in the conversation. But I'm going to be clear about this. I'm not pro-trans. I'm pro-human. I'm all about treating people with dignity. I'm all about treating people humanely. I'm all about being polite. To include, if you've done enough in your presentation that I'm convinced you're a woman or a man, and I address you as such, and that's exactly what you wanted, take it. Take the victory. All right? If I'm being polite, if I'm being cordial, if I'm being humane, then take it as such. The moment you try to force me to convert to your belief system, the moment you try to force me to accept your thought process, I have a natural regurgitation reflex to that. And a lot of that has to do with religion. So maybe we agree on the religious part. At the risk of sounding like a hypocrite, because I'm a big fan of not being a hypocrite, I'm not pro-trans. I don't feel like I'm anti-trans because deep down, I'm not impacted by the issue whatsoever. To the best of my knowledge, nobody in my inner personal circle that I'm emotionally or biologically attached to, this is an issue that we're invested in. Which kind of goes back to that video I made. Why are we being outraged? However, because I'm such a huge fan of Newton's third law, all right, every action has to have an equal and opposite reaction. If I'm not pro by Newton's third law, that means I'm anti. And I can't argue with the scientific logic behind it. I'm not pro. I think anti is heavily worded emotionally. I'm just not anything. I just don't care. And I don't see the reason for me to take up a position and pick a side on an issue I don't care about because I'm not directly affected by it. Do I have some opinions on this subject? Well, sure. It's been shoved into my face. Of course I have an opinion. As far as the anti-trans laws that you're speaking of, I think it's more of a focus on competitive sports. Now, we could argue back and forth, and if that's what this channel is for, then so be it. It's not really an argument I'm interested in having, and I'll tell you, because I'm not emotionally invested. I don't have an emotional investment. If you do, and you want to have discourse, argue, disagree, whatever, polite, of course I'll entertain it. I mean, that's what the channel's for. As far as my opinion goes, whether the results have been cherry-picked, whether these incidents have been isolated specifically for the purpose of creating outrage and sensationalism, I understand. However, it doesn't change the fact. I'm not a big fan at least for this part, I'm not a big fan in the concept of people choosing for ulterior motives. Whether it's the boy in Virginia who wants to rape young girls in high school, or whether it's the boy who is not as competitive in his gender sport, so he wants to compete against the females and win, I'm not all for that. Outside of that, am I well aware that there could be a tremendous amount of nuance with people with gender dysphoria, gender misidentity at birth due to underdeveloped genitalia or overdeveloped genitalia? Yeah, I'm well aware that there's more nuance. And I think in my back catalog, I discuss it. I'm open to it. I can have a discussion. And at the same time, I don't have to agree and I don't have to be converted. I think for those who have ulterior motives, I think that's where it's a problem. And I've made at least one or two videos where I talk about evil, E-V-I-L-lution, or the devolution of things, where you have a concept, all right, you have an idea, and it's specifically designed for a legitimate reason to address a legitimate issue for a legitimate group of people. And then what happens is whether the idea becomes popular or not, other people latch onto it and they depurify it, they taint it, they corrupt it. There may be a group of people where the trans issue is very specific, whether it's gender dysmorphia, whether it's a psychological condition, whether it was the misidentification at birth. There could be a small group of people that trans is a very, very serious issue. And then I think there's a group of people that are taking advantage of a trend and a concept for their own personal gain. And I think it's taking away from the original purity. And regardless, I think at the core what you have is people who, I think you have both. I think you have people who are very humane, very kind and courteous, who are like, look, biological girls need to compete against each other and biological boys need to compete against each other. All right? And they're keeping it very simple. I think there are other people who have a more emotional investment that are taking away from the purity of it. The purity could be biological boys compete against biological boys, biological girls compete against biological girls. If you've done enough whether it's gender dysmorphia, gender misidentification. If you've done enough to basically be one or the other, it's nobody's business. All right? And I think it's nobody's business. And I apologize, it's a very wide open statement, but I'm going to leave it at that. Other than that, the people who have a different agenda that are tainting, whoops, my apologies, Sheila, it looks like I got that video produced. I'll get it posted here in a moment. I think with anything, the people that are against the whole trans thing, whether it's sports or not, I think there are people who are so emotionally invested against the whole transsexual thing that whether or not they're impacted or not, they're overly inserting themselves and attempting to adversely affect others because for whatever reason they chose to get invested. And vice versa. There's people that are pro-trans that are not impacted by it. They don't have any investment in it, but they're allowing themselves to be outraged and they're choosing to actively invest in it. And I think that's a problem. I think at the core, it comes down to a more quiet and nuanced discussion against, at least at the athletic level. Let's just use athletic as an example. I think at the athletic level, it's a more privatized, more nuanced discussion that may need to be had at a very specific level. I think, Sheila, you were making the case for the swimmer that I used as an example, that she is very dedicated to the transition, was a very competitive male swimmer, but then felt as though, this is the case. Regardless, it's not a subject I'm attached to. And Staci, I understand that you are. You have your reasons. I have a very genuine, curious nature about me, so legitimately I'm curious why you're attached to it, but at the same time it's also none of my business. If you want to share your attachment, by all means. If you don't want to share it, if you don't want to make it public, I also understand. If for some reason you're offended and you can't get involved in the conversation now, I understand. Just so you're aware, there was no purposeful intent to offend or upset you. Hopefully you understood going into it that I'm expressing my opinions on the subject. However, I still maintain the Jordan Peterson attitude, which is I have no problem doing my best to be a decent human being and treat people kindly, courteously, etc. Beyond that, I also find it distasteful when people who demand tolerance are not tolerant themselves. And I often question what is the original pure circumstance and how legitimate is it? Because I think by the time it reaches people like us, I think we're getting a very distorted view. And Staci, if you can maybe express the more pure form, the more pure view that hasn't been tainted by the media, maybe that could help develop some understanding. Because I think by the time it reaches the average person like me, there's perhaps a level of impurification that's taken place. And hopefully I'm making a lot of sense. Because again, while expressing my opinion, I don't have to express my opinion with the purpose and intent of offending or insulting anybody. So I'm below 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and shut the hell up and get this published. And for anybody who sees this, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say and think. I do ask that you maintain a level of decency and you maintain some courtesy and some politeness. I can't stop you if you don't, but if the purpose is to open dialogue and bridge gaps and try to understand how other people can think and feel, I think the bigger issue is this. Let's say Staci and I disagree on this one topic. You take 100 topics. We can agree on over 80 of them. All right? But maybe there's 20 topics or less that she and I disagree with. Do those topics have to be the reason why we pitch a tent, we pick a camp, we pitch a tent, we take up arms, and we oppose each other because of 20 or less topics we don't see eye to eye on. And that's kind of been my whole point of contention, whether it's the outrage cancel culture, whether it's the media bias. It's kind of the whole point of my channel is, if Staci and I can agree on over 80 plus topics, why do we have to let 20 or less topics be the source of division? And who knows? Depending on the severity, depending on the seriousness, depending on the level of investment, one out of those topics could be serious enough to cause division. I'm well aware of that possibility, but what if they're not? Why do we have to be so strongly committed to certain things? And Staci may be strongly committed to the whole trans movement where I'm not. In which case, I'm trying to take up the position of, that's cool. You do you. I'm not. All right? But I don't feel as though I need to go out of my way to invest myself in the opposition. All right? If there's a direct opposition to trans, not interested, because I have my opinion, but I'm not affected by it. It doesn't impact me. It doesn't affect me. So I'm going to go about my business. I'm not going to invest, and I'm not going to invest in the opposition that may be dedicated to adversely affecting people like Staci. And that's part of the point I was trying to make. So please, if you watch this, leave a comment, get involved in the conversation, see if we can continue to build more bridges. And if you do, you're awesome.